Has the hierarchy of power actually changed within the DC universe? We're going to talk about that right now. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back. You guys know we like doing tier lists on this channel. That's what we're doing today, talking only the DC Extended Universe, movies, extended versions of said movies, and one television show. Now, lots happened since the last time we talked about these films, and opinions continue to change, but I need your all's thoughts down below. Your lists, please give me your list. Tell me why. What's your favorite movie in the DCEU? And of course, today is in honor of Black Adam, where the hierarchy of power is about to did change. Did it change? I don't know. All right, we're getting started with some individual projects, Birds of Prey being the first one. By the way, if you're here and you're enjoying this video, you want to drop a like down below. That would help this channel and maybe my integrity. Probably not. Birds of Prey. This was a movie that I was excited about because you're introducing some extremely popular DC characters, those along for the ride, but the focus is obviously Harley Quinn. I like the character of Black Canary. I like the villain that we're going up against in Black Mask, and honestly, I thought Ewan McGregor did an awesome job. It's not entirely the Black Mask that I'm used to, a little bit more eccentric, but he owned the role. He did exactly what he was needing to do to go up against Harley Quinn. Now, the way this movie played out, it was kind of breaking the fourth wall. It had this Deadpool quality to it. The filmmaking was fairly solid. Everything about it was solid. There's one action scene in particular that is extremely memorable when Harley Quinn breaks in. You really get to see the potential of her powers, but it's also a storyline that is fairly forgettable. And, you know, I watched this for the first time. I said, that was fun. I had a pretty good time with it. There were things in there that maybe I would have worked on a bit more. Some of the dialogue didn't entirely feel authentic. Maybe that breaking the fourth wall concept didn't work from start to finish, even though I think it worked maybe better than something like a She-Hulk, not on the level of something like a Deadpool. So it has a lot going for it, but it also has some things working against it. Like I said, some of the dialogue, some of those conversations. The third act, while action-packed, it didn't fully deliver on the build-up that we were getting. And it's also a movie that isn't all that memorable. Like going back and rewatching it, I saw things, I'm like, oh, I did not even recall that remotely being in this film. It doesn't quite stick with you like some of these other DC films, and that's why I'm going the okay tier for Birds of Prey. Some people think this is a bad movie. I don't. I had some fun with it. Aquaman, James Wan. This is a crazy movie. There's so many things. You know, everybody always points to the octopus playing the drums. And yeah, that's a little insane. And there are some insane aspects. You know, when Pitbull comes on and they're going through the desert, I'm thinking to myself, what? What is this? It's crazy. It's kooky. It's wacky. It's not what I expected this Aquaman movie to be, maybe before Jason Momoa was cast, but it does somewhat capture what we know and love about Aquaman from the comics. He's always been the butt of a joke, but when you cast Jason Momoa, you can't make Aquaman a joke. You just can't. Now, the film itself, it's long, a bit too long. The more I watch this movie, the more I find that the length impacts the experience in a way to where I wasn't maybe feeling it the first time as much because there were so many insane things that I was seeing on screen. I'm like, oh, that's cool. The visuals, great. The underwater scenes, which is a lot of the film, the way that James Wan's able to handle those is fantastic. The storyline isn't quite as tight as it needs to be. There are a lot of loose ends, a lot of subplots that don't entirely play in. The action is fun. You get to see the brute strength of Jason Momoa as Aquaman. I thought Patrick Wilson did a really nice job as that antagonist towards the end of the film, and kind of the fishy things. It's an Aquaman pun. The fishy things that are going on with his brother and then setting up that final battle was really cool. It just takes a while to get there. So going back and rewatching this movie, I found the pacing to be more of a problem than I have in the past. So that's why I'm going to put Aquaman on the okay tier. But again, another okay DC movie. Next up, Shazam. Shazam is one of those films that I was hesitant about because I saw the trailer and I said, it looks, it looks fine. And it's kind of how I feel about the Shazam 2 trailer. I'm watching the trailer going, that's fine. But when you watch the movie, the experience is just so lighthearted and fun. And we talk about capturing the character from the comics. That's what Shazam is at his core. He's a kid that grows up in a foster home, so you have to capture that family dynamic. You have to cast two really good actors. I thought the young actor did a nice job as Billy in this movie. You get to see kind of that coming-of-age vibe, but when he turns into Zachary Levi, you expect Levi to act the exact same. And he does. I mean, it's like looking into a mirror. These two actors fully capturing what each other provide. And the character of Shazam, I always thought was going to be a hard thing to accomplish on screen because I have to buy that this is still a kid. And I bought that, right? The villain itself, Mark Strong does a nice job. And there's one scene in particular. You go from this funny, fun, lighthearted vibe to what happens in that office scene where they're all meeting at the table. And I'm like, whoa. That's where you start to see the director of Annabelle come into play, and you get those horror vibes. And I hope there's a little bit more of that in Shazam 2, because you have the kids growing up. But speaking of the kids, the moments that happen towards the end where you get those big reveals, it's not as much the villain that we're going up against, even though those scenes were fun enough. I thought the villain was a little bit on the weak side. But when we get the Shazam family, that's when the movie just went up another notch, right? Nothing spectacular about this film, but it didn't have to be, and that's why I thought Shazam did exactly what it needed to do, and it's more lighthearted than some of the other DCEU movies. Not everyone loves that. I thought it was nice. Wonder Woman, the first one, directed by Patty Jenkins, starring Gal Gadot. I was nervous for this movie because I did not love Gal Gadot's performance in Batman v Superman. She was fine. I just didn't see enough from her to convince me that she could carry this entire film, and I was wrong. I'll come out and admit that. She was great in this movie. Her chemistry with Chris Pine, Pine's character in general, did everything he needed to do to capture that romance from the comics. And there's this darkness, there's this bleakness to the first Wonder Woman that kind of has that Zack Snyder vibe carrying through. But it takes a different approach, and it brings Wonder Woman down to earth in this fish out of water story. It does kind of resemble that first Thor movie where she has no clue what to do in this situation. She doesn't really know how humanity in general works. So that's so much fun to see, and it adds this lightness to an otherwise pretty heavy story because the villains are dark. I don't love the villains in this movie. They're kind of throwaway, kind of forgettable. I like the actors in there, but it's all about the romance here. It's all about the chemistry between Pine and Gadot, her being able to fit in or not be able to fit in, and the side characters, the supporting characters, the crew that they surround themselves with. Each character is fairly memorable, and the vibe that Patty Jenkins gives off, and the trench scene. Like, everybody wants to call back the trench scene in this movie, and for good reason. It's really, really great, man. It's one of the standouts of the DCEU in general. The third act, not as strong. I don't hate the third act like a lot of other people do. There is a big CGI battle, and it's not as heartfelt as the other moments, but you do get one heartfelt moment with what happens to Chris Pine's character, and I thought that. I mean, Steve Trevor, that's a character that you feel for in that moment, so even with my issues with the third act, that moment was incredible. I'm still going great tier for the first Wonder Woman. I think this is a great movie. Maybe a little overrated, but great. A movie that's not overrated because a lot of people hated Wonder Woman 1984. When I first saw the film, I thought it did a nice job of capturing the other side of Wonder Woman from the comics because there are two very distinct versions of Wonder Woman. You have the darker version that we see, and then the lighter version that feels more like Christopher Reeve's Superman, and there are scenes in this movie that capture that Christopher Reeve Superman type of feeling when she flies for the first time, even though there are inconsistencies in the universe that this movie plays a big part in. But I was still really on board with those moments in this film. And bringing back Steve Trevor, I questioned, and honestly, I still question. I don't love the decision to this day, but you once again get that chemistry. You once again get that romance. Pedro Pascal, Maxwell Lord, an interesting character there, right? What happens in the third act, it gets a little overboard, it's a little crazy, and I'm still not entirely sure what they were going for, but he does a nice job. Kristen Wiig, I see what they were trying to do with her character. It obviously has the Riddler, Batman Forever vibes where she's just obsessed, and there are some things about these characters that work against each other when you look at the overall message of Wonder Woman, and then you see this movie, and you're like, why was that decision made? Here's where I think the issue with this movie starts to become more prominent the more you watch it. And this is what I felt going back, rewatching it. And I think the biggest thing about this movie for me was watching it right after the first Wonder Woman back to back. It's the first time I've done that. And while I do think it captures the other side of Wonder Woman from the comics, you do start to see why they didn't do that with the first film, because that first version of Wonder Woman is, I think, what we should have gotten more of in this movie. And then the writing in general is just so off compared to the first one. Some of the lines of dialogue, where the story goes, the ridiculousness of the third act. People want to talk about the first Wonder Woman and its third act. This third act is significantly worse. And I saw the inconsistencies much more so watching these two movies back to back. And it really bugged me because there is so much potential with Wonder Woman 1984, and I will stand by that until the day that I die, but it just didn't capture it. And yeah, the movie got worse. It's unfortunate. It's still nice to look at. I like some of the visuals. There are moments that just make me go, oh my gosh. There were so many things about this movie that I still enjoyed, but I have to put it on the meh tier. It just... man, it really hurt it watching it right after the first one. I spent years denying the greatness of Man of Steel. I still thoroughly enjoyed the movie, but seeing that first trailer and the movie not necessarily living up to that the first time, I was like, okay, well, it could have been better. But I still really enjoyed it. But the more I go back and I watch this movie, the more I see the brilliance of what Zack Snyder was going for. And I think the biggest pushback for this film, if I recall correctly when it first came out, was that third act and how Superman's not going around saving people because he's too busy worrying about the aliens that are going to destroy the planet. And looking at that criticism 9 years later, I know people have other flaws with the film, and those flaws are valid, but that particular criticism, I just start to laugh and see how ridiculous it truly is, because we've seen so many movies since then where there is total destruction and no one even thinks to point it out. I'm like, that's not even a real issue with the movie. Superman is still becoming Superman. He's not the Superman that we know and love. He's not that Christopher Reeve, save a cat from a tree Superman just yet. He was on his way. A little stumble there with Batman v Superman because he still had to see the darkness in that movie. But I feel if we get another Man of Steel movie, we're going to start to see that version of Superman, especially introducing other characters down the line that I know we're going to introduce. So I'm okay with this being a pure introduction, a pure origin story to the idea, the concept of Superman. And approaching the movie from that perspective really allows you to appreciate what they were doing with this movie, specifically what Zack Snyder is trying to draw comparisons to, the imagery, the metaphors, and you get it. And they're a little on the nose in a movie like Batman v Superman, but in this film, I thought they worked beautifully. The more I watch Man of Steel, the more I'm just like, this captures so much of what the comics were able to capture with different versions of the character, and Henry Cavill puts in an incredible performance and actually makes Superman interesting. Not that I've never found him interesting. Again, Reeves did a nice job, but this, to me, is my definitive version, and I've come to really appreciate the movie way more so over the years. And I get it. You get on Letterboxd, it's still like a 2 point whatever. Not everybody loves the film. Some people hate the movie. That's fine. I don't care. I'm putting it on the awesome tier. I don't care. I just don't. Batman v Superman. We have two versions on this list. We have the original edition and then the ultimate edition. And I've heard some people say, wow, the ultimate edition, it just adds like 30 minutes. It doesn't do all that much. To me, it does so much. It still doesn't fix my flaws with, well, certain flaws with the movie. Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, I don't like him. I don't think I'll ever be able to like him. Maybe that post-credit scene in Justice League, that's probably a better version than what we got in the other movie, but it still doesn't fix that issue. And then some of the dialogue in this film and that build-up to them going up against each other, I just felt like there were moments, integral moments, lacking from the story. Jesse Eisenberg's role in this movie in the third act, I wasn't buying that as much. And then you have the dialogue, the Martha scene, which I think gets a little bit overblown. I don't hate it as much as other people, but it's not good. This is not good. I can't sit here and appreciate that. But me saying Batman v Superman is actually an okay film, after walking out of that theater being so disappointed, I'm standing by that, and it actually allows me to look at this Ultimate Edition and say, well, maybe this Ultimate Edition is more than okay, right? The original version still has the incredible fight sequences. It still has the way that the world looks at Superman. It's able to deliver a really nice version of Batman here. Ben Affleck does a great job. Alfred, that dynamic is really cool. Wonder Woman, her role, while I was still getting used to that performance, her role was really important and integral in this film. It does tend to drag. And Austin, if it drags, then why do you like the longer version? Well, the longer version gives us more to Superman's side of the story, and it actually gives him a reason to want to go after the Batman instead of just doing it because he has to do it in the original edition, which makes me think, why didn't Warner Brothers want to include that? Because that really does impact the movie. It affects it in a much larger way than I anticipated watching it through for the first time. So I'm not for sure why they cut that very important storyline, but it's there in the Ultimate Edition, which allows me to appreciate that side of the story more. And that fight means more when we get that side of the story in the Ultimate Edition. So all of this being said, a lot of people don't like Batman v Superman. I still think it's okay because it's very entertaining and some great moments. But I'm actually going to go Ultimate Edition on the good tier. It's a better version because there's just more story there for Superman. And we have a very similar thing for Justice League, except there's a Justice League directed by Joss Whedon. I take nothing away from what he did for the MCU. The Avengers movies were really, really well done, but that style did not work with this version of Justice League. That style didn't work in this universe in general because there are so many cheesy and ridiculous moments, and you get off to like the worst start ever with that horrible phone camera angle and the obvious CGI over Superman's mustache, and it just looks so cheap. It looked like a student film. Okay, maybe it's not fully a student film, but you see what I'm saying here. It looked terrible, and there were so many moments like that movie and storylines that just, why are they in this film? Give us more to Steppenwolf. And I don't understand how this villain was so just bland, dull. Even the look. You see why they changed it in Zack Snyder's Justice League. He looked terrible. He looked like a PlayStation 2 video game, not even a PlayStation 3 video game character. The scenes are still really good. You have Themyscira going after Steppenwolf. You have Batman with this odd shift in his mentality, but he's still trying to assemble the Justice League. The introduction for the characters, they were fine. Cyborg gets absolutely nothing to do, although I really enjoyed this performance. So the build-up just isn't there in Justice League. The payoff, there are some cool scenes. Superman coming back, obviously that was a cool scene, but even then, there's not a lot within that to build your enthusiasm for that return. You're just looking forward to it because it's Superman, and the movie doesn't really, I don't understand a lot of the decisions here in this universe. So I want to shift over to Zack Snyder's Justice League, and when I hear people say, Austin, it's just the same movie, it's the exact same movie, I look at you and I say, please, go watch the first one, and then go watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. And if you still think it's the same movie, you're lying. You're just lying to me. It's different. Now, maybe it's not different enough for you to love one and hate the other. That's understandable, but it's not the same movie. It's a distinctly different film with numerous storylines that weren't even close to being included in the first Justice League. I don't understand when people say, I'm just like, hey, did you watch them? Doesn't mean you have to like Zack Snyder's Justice League, because it is long. Like, it's 4 hours, okay? Not everyone's going to be able to make it through that and still be invested, because you have the same plot points, but everything is more fleshed out. They're even throwing in a new character. See that guy right there? That's Darkseid. He plays a huge role in this film, and they even make Steppenwolf look 10 times better, but they also give him a reason for you as an audience to be sympathetic. We have a reason to care about the villain here. We didn't have that in the original Justice League. Yes, it has that Zack Snyder darkness, and there are some things in there that I thought were kind of cheap, right? The inclusion of Martian Manhunter, I'm like, okay, well, that seemed like it was thrown in. And yeah, it was thrown in because the original final scene was supposed to be Green Lantern. Instead, they shifted to Martian Manhunter, and I don't love that. It seems a little bit cheap. Ben Affleck didn't really look like he wanted to be there in that extra scene, but he did look like he wanted to be there in the rest of the movie, because I actually bought his character turn. I bought the shift in his mentality. There's much more there. There are sequences with Alfred, scenes with Wonder Woman to where we actually care. And he's not a complete douchebag to Wonder Woman like he is in the first Justice League. Different movie. When you get new information, you're able to put things in perspective. And after getting Zack Snyder's Justice League, I am going to throw the original Justice League on the awful tier. I'm putting Zack Snyder's Justice League on the awesome tier. Different movies. When we get in that David Ayer cut of Suicide Squad, look, it's going to be hard to make Suicide Squad a good movie because there are so many things about it, from the graphics to the silliness to the character introductions to the obviousness of when some of these characters are going to die.
Here comes Slipknot, the man who can climb anything.
But there's some things about the performances. I thought Will Smith did a nice job. Obviously, Harley Quinn is great. She's always great. She's great in this film. There are certain characters to where they have something. There's a little bit of emotion that you can gravitate towards. I think about that final sequence when they're going up against the big blobby blobs and Enchantress. Oh, I forgot about Enchantress. Oh, man. You know, I heard the original point of this movie was to make Joker the actual villain, and I think to myself, that would have been 1,000 times better. Enchantress was such a bad villain, and her brother, what's his name? Schmoopy Schmoop? Floopy Floop? I don't know. Am I making that up? Did she actually have a brother? Am I making that up? Just a bad movie. Even a movie that my wife enjoyed. I got her to go back and watch it. We got 20 minutes in. She said, oh, well, you know. I'm like, yeah, see? See, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm putting Suicide Squad on the bad tier. You know, not everyone was a huge fan of the Suicide Squad, of James Gunn's version of this universe, but talk about a complete 180. Talk about actually giving us interesting characters, casting people like Idris Elba, and yeah, we knew John Cena was going to be in it, but we didn't know Peacemaker was going to be so good he gets his own television series, but he was that good. And this cast is amazing. You once again have Harley Quinn. She gets some standout moments that even in her own film, like a Birds of Prey, it didn't have that kind of impact, so she's awesome. The villain, Starro, I can't believe we got that villain in a live-action movie, a villain that I've been watching. I mean, even going back to that Justice League episode, I think it was Justice League. Maybe it was Superman, the animated series, where Starro is a major villain. That's one of my favorite episodes of any DC animated thing ever. And that's the villain that we get in this film. Handled in somewhat of a ridiculous way, but it works. And James Gunn's style, his flair, you know, on the level of what Guardians of the Galaxy was, but way darker, because this is an R-rated film, so they're not afraid to kill off people. Heads are exploding. You don't entirely see when villain deaths are going to come like the first one. Anyone could die. We see that in the opening sequence. My God, that killed Pete Davidson. But I really love the way that this movie progressed. The humor works for me. A couple of jokes, you know, some back and forth between Idris Elba and John Cena. Not everyone worked, but you look at your average standard comedy, if you can get a comedy that delivers 60-40, you know, 60% of the jokes work, 40 don't. I think the Suicide Squad's closer to 70-30, so already better than a solid comedy. But then you have the action, you have the characters, the characteristics, the ending's a little ridiculous with Starro. Yes, for sure, maybe there's a sequence or two I wouldn't have included, but it doesn't matter because it's such a 180 from the first Suicide Squad, and I actually loved a Suicide Squad movie. We're going awesome tier. What a fun experience. Speaking of fun, Peacemaker. Who would have known that the spin-off of Suicide Squad could approach it, be on the same level, for some even surpass Suicide Squad, when the focus is on John Cena as Peacemaker. This is a show that dissects this character. It really dives deep into the psyche of Peacemaker, why he does what he does, why he made the decision from killing Rick Flag and the Suicide Squad to doing all of these horrible things that he's done. You hated him at the end of the Suicide Squad, but in Peacemaker, you kind of love him or you love to hate him. Either way, it does its job. You can still feel James Gunn's writing in this show, but it also brings in other directors to where each episode feels a little bit different. The villainous characters, that was a really cool build-up. Yeah, you get the cameos from certain Justice League members, okay, but I didn't care about that as much at that point. It was cool, but I was more invested in Peacemaker and building up to this big mystery here. And the crew surrounding Peacemaker, oh my God. Danielle Brooks, Jennifer Holland, Freddie Stroma as Vigilante. Come on. I mean, how do you not love Vigilante? It's like their version of Deadpool, and every scene with him was fantastic. I thought this was actually funnier than the Suicide Squad. It worked really well for me. Yeah, I'm putting Peacemaker on the awesome tier. No doubt, in my mind, we need more DCEU television shows. Black Adam. This is the one we've been building up to, where the hierarchy of the DC universe is about to... You've heard it 1,000 times, but I like the passion from The Rock. I really do. I think he's passionate about this character. I think he's passionate about this world. I believe his impact on this movie is felt because, again, I'm going to stand by this. I know a lot of people said The Rock, he does the same thing over and over. It's the same guy. No. I felt the passion in this character. This is the first time in a long time that I felt The Rock was trying to give somewhat of a different type of performance. It's still The Rock, and you get The Rock-isms, and I'm not going to argue that, okay? But there's this confidence playing the character of Black Adam that he conveys really, really well. And his presence in this movie, along with the JSA, carries us through some of these slower sequences and the things that happen with the humans here and the really shoehorned in ADR in certain scenes. And there are some technical flaws with this movie. There are some script flaws with this movie. Characters are spouting out one-liners, and yeah, it's a little overly ridiculous. It's not that MCU type of humor that's going for ridiculousness. It's accidentally ridiculous, and that's sometimes the worst. So those scenes didn't quite work for me. The movie also feels a bit lengthy, and I didn't care about the human characters as much, other than one comedic relief character. He was really good. When The Rock is on screen with Dr. Fate and Hawkman, those are the scenes that are so compelling, and I felt Pierce Brosnan's performance. I felt Aldous Hodge. Again, Dwayne Johnson is really good. And the action scenes, the brutality behind the action scenes. It makes a lot of sense. It came out that this movie was going to be rated R until very recently. It makes sense. I mean, the dude, he's crushing skulls. He's just shooting people with lightning to death. Lightning people to death. He's electrocuting people. That's the way to say it. It's cool. It's fun. It's an entertaining movie. It's different. It's not the best movie in terms of the way it's put together. I understand that. They had a lot of time. Maybe they should have been better than it was. But it's fun. And I think audiences are going to respond to this film. So I am, I think I could see myself putting this on the good tier one of these days. I'm still going to stay okay tier, but it's definitely entertaining. Okay, we've reached that point in the video to where we are going to rank these movies. If you're still here and you want to drop that like or keep leaving those comments, man, I appreciate it. I did a giveaway in my Black Adam spoiler-free review. Stay subscribed to this channel. I'm going to be putting the winner of that giveaway on my community page. So just keep an eye out, and I will notify the winner of that giveaway. Start at the bottom, obviously Justice League, followed by the first Suicide Squad, and then Wonder Woman 1984 on the OK tier. Unfortunately, I'm going to go BVS at the bottom of that tier just because of some of the flaws, followed by Birds of Prey, and then one that's, it kind of captures that insanity in Aquaman. Black Adam, though, you know, it's at the top of the OK tier. On the good tier, I think I'm going to go Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition, slightly above Shazam, but both good movies. Wonder Woman on that great tier, and then we have the top four. Now this is where it becomes tough. This is going to shock a lot of people. At the bottom, I'm going to go Zack Snyder's Justice League, still a movie that I absolutely love. I'm going the Suicide Squad. I do think, after rewatching, that Peacemaker is better, but this is a bit of a change here. I'm going Man of Steel. This set up the universe so beautifully. It's not a film that critics love. It's not a film that's overly embraced by a lot of people, but those who love this movie, I think we all understand kind of where each other is coming from. I'm feeling pretty good about that right now. The top four, I mean, they could switch at any point. They're all great projects. So the DCEU, obviously, it isn't all bad. I actually think it's better than people give it credit for. It's just the inconsistencies of that OK tier. You have the movies that people were looking forward to that should have been a lot better. And then the fact that it's different cuts of different movies are what makes some versions better. It gets a little bit, yeah, maybe the first version should have been a lot better. But the projects that I love, I absolutely love. I've been talking long enough. Thank you guys for joining me. Come back. We're going to be doing more tier lists, more DC talk, and we're approaching Black Panther, so we're going to shift over to Marvel. See you guys soon.